Good afternoon, good morning, and good day wherever you may be joining us from. Welcome to another edition of the Digital Download, the longest running weekly business talk show on LinkedIn Live. Now globally syndicated on TuneIn Radio through IBGR, the world's #1 business talk, news, and strategy radio network. Today we're diving into cracking the code of B2B buyers. We have a special guest, Kerry Cunningham, to help us with the discussion. Kerry is a seasoned B2B marketing strategist, researcher, and thought leader. But before we bring Kerry on, let's go around the set and introduce everyone. Actually, today we're only two. While we're doing that, though, why don't you in the audience reach out to a friend, ping them, and have them join us? We strive to make the digital download an interactive experience. Audience participation is highly encouraged. Tim, why don't you go first?
Thank you, Bertrand. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Digital Download. My name is Tim Hughes. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite, and I wish to pass on everybody else's apologies. We've had a bit of sickness and hospital appointments and schools get in the way, so it's just now there are two. But we should be back to normal next week.
That happens. And myself, Bertrand Godillot, I am the founder and managing partner of Odysseus & Co., a very proud DLA Ignite partner. So as I said, this week on the Digital Download, we'll speak with Kerry. His extensive experience and research in demand generation and B2B buying behaviors provide a unique perspective on how sellers can effectively engage with and influence B2B buyers. Let's bring him on.
Hello, Kerry.
Good morning.
Hi.
Good morning.
Good afternoon. And good morning
Kerry.
From Southern California.
Yes, thank you for that's an early call for you, so thank you for joining.
Definitely.
Kerry, let's start by having you tell us a little bit more about you, your background, and what led you where you are today.
Great, thank you. So right now I work at 6 Sense, a software company that makes AI-based software for identifying B2B buyers and engaging B2B buyers. And I've been here about 3 years. Prior to 6 Sense, I was at Forrester and Serious Decisions, both analyst firms, for about 8 years. Prior to that, I had a really long career in B2B, primarily in the BDR, SDR space. I ran a third-party teleservices organization in North America for about 12 years. We had offices in the Bay Area in California, so all tech companies, but then also opened up a satellite office outside of Montreal. And then through some acquisitions, also had offices in Austin and Manila. So I had, at the time we sold the company, I had about 500 BDR types reporting up into my organization, doing business development work for lots and lots of almost entirely tech companies. Between those two times, after we sold the company and before I became an analyst, I went back to graduate school. I spent 4 years working in academic research labs in social sciences and got a master's in organizational psychology. And apart from one, using all the money I would otherwise have been using to retire, two, it was just the most phenomenal time of my life. And it really has informed all of the research that I do now. I run a research practice at 6 Sense, which is pretty unusual for a software company. And we'll get into it.
I think, though, to add to that, Kerry, is that there is a vacuum and there is an appetite for this sort of research, and when the CEBs and that got bought up by Gartner and then gradually dismantled, I think that there's people want this sort of, because they want to be able to use this sort of data to inform their strategy and what they're going to do, or totally ignore it.
Right. Yeah.
As a lot of people seem to do.
That is absolutely what people seem to do, despite however loud and vociferously I say things. And I've been saying some of the same things for the last 7 or 8 years. I'm not tired of saying them yet because I have some righteous zeal behind what we're talking about. But I think when you look around and you apply even some normal common sense to the way things work in B2B, you pretty quickly come to the conclusion that that doesn't make a lot of sense about a lot of practices in B2B. And so, to be honest, it's a lot of fun identifying these things that don't make sense and trying to figure out, one, how do you tell the story to get people to understand that it doesn't make sense, this thing that we've been doing forever, and then figure out how do we advise people on what to do, because it's sometimes you do have to just, if there's bad practices in place, you do have to just get rid of the bad practice even before you have a great alternative, to be honest with you, because it's the alternative to some of these bad practices. Doing nothing is better than what you're doing. But in most cases, you really have to find some replacement. So that's a big part of the job as well.
But one of the strange things, I think, Kerry, is that quite often we're all B2B buyers.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And we expect certain things, and we like certain things and don't like certain things. And then what seems to happen is that we get into or sit in front of our screens for work and forget all that, and follow this playbook that's been around for 30, 40 years, and get the results that we get, rather than actually thinking about our own experiences.
To me, that is the source of most of the bad stuff that's happening, particularly on the marketing side, but not just on the marketing side. But that's absolutely right. And almost every time I'm talking with marketers today, I ask, just think about your own behavior for a minute. And like, if you think about, would I respond to the kind of thing I'm expecting my buyers to respond to? The answer will come back no, 95% of the time. And you can go up and down the list of things that are standard practices in B2B. And the answer for most senior B2B marketing or sales leaders is, I would never engage with that kind of tactic, and yet we build our plans, our dreams, everything is built around other people doing these things we would never do. It's crazy.
So Kerry, that's interesting. And let me ask you a foundational question. What makes B2B buyers tick?
Yeah. So this is fascinating, and we could spend the rest of the time on this, and I'm happy to.
I'm sure.
So I've got a bunch of good research. There's some research from some other folks that we can talk about as well. So like the first thing to understand is your buyer. So in most B2B purchasing, the buyer is a group or a team of people, not an individual person, right? So if you're selling things that cost in the hundreds or low thousands of dollars, maybe you sell to an individual person. But in most cases, when you're selling software to a company or machinery to a company or something like that, it's going to be a pretty large group of people. Now, when we go out and look across B2B, if you ask thousands of people, as we have, who've been part of a buying process, how big was that purchase? The average is going to be a couple $100,000. And then the number of people involved in that buying process is going to be 11 on average. And that's pretty consistent globally. It's a little more some places and a little less somewhere else, but not very much. And so the first thing to understand is it's a group activity, and we have to understand the psychology of groups if we want to understand what's happening in that buying group. So the second thing that is, I think, quite new from our research in this past year is that buyers already have prior experience with the brands that they're going to be evaluating nearly all the time. So buyers say that 90% of the time they've got experience with at least one of the vendors they're going to evaluate. That number is backed up by research that Bain did a couple of years ago that was published in the Harvard Business Review. But then we dug a little deeper, and what we found is that buyers say that on day one of their buying journey, when they go out to just start researching a new solution, they already have experience, not just aware of, but they have experience with 4 out of the 5 vendors that they're going to evaluate. And so I was surprised when I saw that number at first, but then, Tim, to your point, when you think about who these people are, who are who are making decisions about, 6-figure, 7-figure purchases, they're not the kids who just graduated from college, right? These are people like us who have the volume and the color of hair that we do. They're people who've been around in their jobs for 20 or 30 years in many cases. So they've been through whatever category you're in. They've been through many purchase cycles in your category. If you are a 25 or 30-year-old sales rep, they've probably been through more cycles for your category of stuff than you have. And so they know the brands in the space. Now, of course, if you're in a brand new category, that's a different thing. If you're a brand new company in the category, maybe they don't know you, but they do know your competitors. All right. So they enter this process. So you've got 11 people, and I'm describing the buying group, but to understand how they tick, you really have to know that these parameters. So you've got 11 people. Each one of those 11 people is an experienced senior business person, and they all have opinions and experience about the vendors they're about to evaluate on day one of the buying journey. So we wrote a paper called No Blank Slates. The buyers are not blank slates. You're not starting from scratch with them. You're starting with a set of people who already have opinions about you, about your competitors, and about what would be good for their business on day one. All right. Now, this is going to come into play when we talk about the back channeling stuff that we just published in a minute. So when they're starting that buying journey, they've got all these opinions. If you've got 11 people, you've got at least 4, maybe 5 opinions about what the organization ought to do. And the rest of the buying journey, it's not as we've always thought about. It's not educating themselves about the category or your solution. Not primarily. They may need to refresh their understanding if it's been a couple of years since they've been in the space. But it's primarily about each member of that buying team arming him or herself to win the internal debate about what they're going to do. And that's a very different kind of buyer than a buyer who's walking into this process as a blank slate, and now you can educate them on the vendors in the category, right? It's really primarily about winning the internal argument about what the organization is going to do. And so some of the other dynamics that are in play are really, really important. In a group environment, a big part of what happens in that group environment is that people are trying to identify some common ground within the vendors that they can say, okay, this one is one that we can all agree on. And whenever that's the case, they're probably never or very unlikely to buy an extreme kind of choice in the category. So if you've got a brand new vendor that's extremely new and has a completely new way of solving this problem, or they're the most innovative way of solving that problem, that may appeal to the business buyer who owns the department that's going to be using this solution. But does the CFO or the head of purchasing and procurement or the IT person, do they care about how innovative and exciting your solution is? Probably not nearly as much, right? That's not there. It's not on the top of their list. Not messing it up is on the top of their list, right? Or not paying, the top dollar. So those dynamics are happening internally. Then what we found is that, as the price goes up for a solution, the buying group size goes up. And so that's not surprising, but then you have to ask yourself, well, why do you need more people just because it costs more? And a big part of the answer to that is so that you're spreading around the risk involved in that decision, right? So if I'm buying something that I can afford with my budget without getting sign off from the CFO, then there's probably not a ton of risk involved in that decision. But if I'm signing off on something that's more expensive, one, I'm going to have to involve the CFO and the head of IT or something like that. But also, I want to, because if that decision doesn't go well, I want everybody who is going to point fingers at me later to have been involved in and nodded yes to that decision. And then they're not going to cut my head off if it doesn't go well, because everybody was involved. So that's a big part of the dynamic in the buying process as well.
And clearly, we all have been through this before, I'm pretty sure. But that raises a question. If you are a challenger, I mean, you are a new entrant. So it's what we're discussing here is the barrier of entry for for enterprise size type of deals. How do we work around this?
Well, I think. Yeah, I think one, it's as hard as we all know it is, right? It's the thing that you do has to be substantially better or cheaper, or one of these vectors that really matter a lot. Like, is it much better at the thing that's got to be done? Is it much less expensive to buy or to own, or both? Or does it somehow allow you to reduce spend in other areas, right? So it can either be less expensive itself or save a lot of labor somehow that's not already being saved. One of the things that we found is that about 3/4 of B2B purchases are within an existing category, a category that the buyer already has, right? So most are just replacing something that's there. So you may have an innovative way of doing that. And certainly, you look like companies like Workday, which I don't know when Workday came into existence, but it didn't exist that long ago, and now it's everywhere, right? So it's certainly possible. Salesforce is an example of one from 25 years ago, whatever it was, that one day it doesn't exist. A few years later, it's starting to catch on, and then it's everywhere. And then that kicked off the replacement of countless numbers of on-premise pieces of software, because now everything moves to the cloud. So that can happen. You have a much better way of delivering your product or service, and that the market appreciates more, and now you can win that way. But you have to have something like that. If you show up with a Me Too in a category, then obviously you're going to have a hard time getting people to take the chance on buying your solution when you're not clearly differentiated in one of those other ways. It does point, however, we can talk about branding, and it's fun to talk about brand marketing with sellers, because sellers will often say, "What are you doing? Don't spend money on that." In fact, a lot of marketing leaders today will say, "What are you doing? Don't spend money on that." But if you're a challenger brand and nobody knows who you are, you're probably not on the day one shortlist. And buyers buy from the day one shortlist 90% of the time. So, you should want your company to be doing some very serious brand and reputation marketing to the audience that you're trying to sell to, because it may be that your primary buyer is dialed into the category enough to know that you exist and to know about you. But if the CFO's never heard of you, if the head of purchasing's never heard of you, if IT people have never heard of you, your chances of getting through that gauntlet are very, very low. And you, as a salesperson, trying to get those people even to talk to you is going to be extremely challenging if they can't look out the window of their computer and see lots of information about you that makes you look smart and trustworthy and all of that. How hard is your primary persona going to fight for you when they have to, in this battle to try to win this deal? And that's really what you need to have happen. Is the person that your messaging, that your product really appeals to, is going to have to fight for you against these other people who have no idea you exist and who do not care about how innovative you are. Maybe a little bit, but not really.
All right. So from that perspective, how can sellers build trust and literally build relationship in advance of the buying process, so that you create that awareness and you gain somehow a competitive advantage on the list of 5?
Oops, I lost your audio. Is that just me?
Yeah, so we said we have a list of 4 or 5 people and 4 or 5 suppliers, and we know we're going to buy from them. Well, at least 80% of the audience is buying from them. How do you, as a seller, build a relationship and try to work around this to build some sort of competitive advantage, even though you may not be in the picture in the first place?
Well, that's why I love the idea of social selling and want to be in a place where we're talking about social selling, because I think that's really where most of the answer is going to be. So in our research, the main kind of facts about the buying journey are: if you do not have a pre-existing relationship with members of that buying party, they are not going to talk to you until they're 70% of the way through the journey. And the trigger to talk to you is that they have already decided where you fit on the short list. But that applies to about 80% of B2B purchases. In the other 20% of B2B purchases, there is some, or there becomes an existing relationship that allows the seller to talk to the buyer prior to the time they pick a winner. And
because your stat of the 80%, I know that there's a lot of sales leaders dismiss it.
Yeah.
And the reason why they dismiss it is that they say, that doesn't bother me because I have an SDR team that are basically hammering on people, kicking down doors, basically going and getting meetings. But what you're saying is that, yes, that's right, but they're only winning 20, if there's 100% of business, they're only winning 20% of it.
Yeah, and I think the percentage that your SDRs are winning is probably much, much smaller than that. So what I would say, so we know that in 80% of buying processes, buyer does not talk to you until after they've decided where you fit in the short list. They picked a winner, they put you on the short list because that's the only reason they would talk to you. But now you may be first, second, third, fourth, or fifth. And it doesn't really change very much after they start talking to you. But if you're an AE and you're covering a big account and you've been working that account as you should over time, and you actually know those people, you met them last year when you took over the account. They weren't in a buying process, but you developed a relationship with them. When they go into that buying process, you'll probably be able to engage with them throughout the whole thing. If you're a trusted resource throughout that whole thing, then you get to, and that's the work of a good AE, right?
So, okay, but that fundamentally is the complete opposite of what the narrative on LinkedIn, especially from the VC community, is, which is that you should only be engaging with companies that are in market.
Right. Well, right. So
no, I agree with what you say. So my view is, if you're engaging with companies that are in market, then you'll have a number of things. One is that all your competitors will be there, so therefore you will have a margin. Every deal that you go into, it will be the competition of drop the price again. Mm-hmm. And we have to take it. Whereas if you're actually talking to people that are not in market, and you can do this, I know that you can do this fast and at scale. You can talk to people and build relationships that are not in market. So when they come to market, you are on the short list.
That's right. Yeah. So so Sixth Sense is built to show you who's in market, because that is where you should be spending the bulk of, say, your demand gen dollars. But we have AEs and we have strategic accounts, and their job is not to wait until an account is in market. Their job is to go develop relationships, build the networks inside those organizations, so that we're not subject to the rules. The rules are you don't get to talk to them until they decide. But if you have good AEs and they're doing their job, you don't have to play by those rules. And that's where the social selling comes in, right? How are you going to get to know these people? Well, a big part of it is you're going to have to surround them in the places where they exist. You're going to have to be delivering value to them. There are lots of different ways. Social selling is one, but there's many other ways. And I think, my company is a really good example of a lot of ways to do that. But that's what you're going to have to do. Now, but by definition, you can't do that to all of the accounts in your universe. If you sell to thousands of accounts, that's just not, if you sell to thousands of accounts, you're going to have a sprinkling of relationships. Even if you do it at scale, you're going to have a handful of relationships in any quarter where you've been able to be involved in that process from the beginning, but you can't build your business entirely on that. You're going to have to play by the, you're going to be subject to the rules of the way the buyers want to buy in most cases. And then if you're really good, maybe your company gets to play outside of those rules in 25% of purchases. Maybe you could get to 30 or something like that if you're really good at it. You're not going to get to 100. And so that's the game that I think we're playing is how do you get your sales team to have relationships with the key buyers that you care about, and then at scale you also have to have your brand have your buyers have a relationship with your brand outside of a buying process. And that's another thing I think we're not the only ones, but we do that really well. We have, for instance, we sponsor something called the CMO Coffee Talk. So at this time every Friday there's two conference calls where CMOs get together and they network and they talk with each other. We sponsor that. We don't present at it. We don't sell at it. We never do. But we provide this forum for the people who make decisions about buying our solution. And it's something that they value a lot, right? So they're getting value from us long before they're in market, whether they ever go in market, right?
And I think that's kind of the difference. There's a difference, that subtle difference, isn't there, between pitching and just being present or sponsoring something. And I think it's that in the film Spinal Tap, there's a quote which is, "There's a thin line between being clever and stupid," and I think that's often the case in marketing, where what happens is that communities are that ability. What we're going to do is we create a community and then we can pitch to them.
Right. Yeah. No, you have to be delivering value and becoming a resource. Well, I would say, put it more generally, you have to participate in the community that you intend to serve with your solutions as a valued member of that community. That's really, if that's the way you have to be thinking about it. And then if you think about it that way, I think you do the right things, right? What does a valued member of this community want? Or back to the way we started this conversation. So if I'm just a practitioner in this community and not somebody trying to sell them something, would I like the thing that I'm doing to this community, or in this community? I've been talking on LinkedIn about the golden rule, and I think we need to be thinking about that a lot.
Kerry, I'd like to spend a little bit of time on the last article that you published, and I'd love you to explain what back channels are.
Yeah.
Yes.
In a B2B context.
I'll give a little a backstory for the back channeling. So last year when we did our survey, we had some questions asking about, whether buyers had prior experience with the vendors they were going to evaluate. We were very surprised that the number was as high as it was. It's everybody knows at least one vendor, and they tend to know 4 out of the 5 vendors or have prior experience with them. So we thought, if you have prior experience with a vendor, how would you do that? Most of the time, it'll be you've been through buying processes with them before, you've evaluated them before, maybe you were a customer. And then we thought, well, what else would be? So if they've got these prior experiences, then they've met people in those companies before. And so that's interesting. And then you think about how people behave today in a social world, in a connected world. We were talking about this before we came on, but when somebody's applying for work in your company, nobody asks for references anymore. You just go out and find them, right? They're easy to find. Why would that be any different when you're looking at solutions to buy? And so this time around in our surveys, we asked, prior to talking to sellers, because we already knew by this point, we're not talking to sellers most of the time until 70% through the journey. But did you talk to anybody else before you talked to sellers? And, I thought, well, maybe 15, 20% or something like that of buyers will say, yeah, I talked to somebody else. 70+%
Wow.
of buyers say, yes, I talked to somebody else. And the numbers are a little bit different. They're statistically significantly different for the non-winning vendor than they are from the winning vendor. They're very high for both. So buyers say that they talk to somebody who is not a seller 70% of the time in non-winning vendors and 77% of the time in winning vendor. And so one, I that was kind of staggering when I saw that number.
Let me just
Yeah.
So what's happening is that the buyers are, so if I'm a vendor, you are basically, because you think about if we think about IT,
Yeah.
it's actually a very small marketplace. Most people kind of know most people. I've got people where we've got 2,000 mutual connections on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And a lot of people know each other. So what's happening is that when we're going out and buying stuff, we're going, right, okay, so we're going to evaluate company X. Anybody know anybody in company X who isn't a salesperson? Oh yeah, I know. I used to work with Bertrand. Okay, give him a call or her a call.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
That's fascinating. So there's actually an ability for organizations to influence even before through relationships that they have.
That's right. Yeah, and so I think it's worthwhile to toss for people who aren't familiar with the research that we've done. There are a couple of things that I think are important for people to understand. So backing up to what we said at the beginning of the process, the buyers are people like us. They've been around for a long time. They're not junior people, so they've been through many cycles before. Also in B2B, we tend to go into an industry and stay most of our careers in that industry. We might jump around different jobs, but we're in an industry, we're in a function. And so the buyers are almost always really experienced people in the categories that we're talking about. And they've been through cycles with, if you're a vendor who's been around for 25 years, they've been through buying cycles with you, even if they've never been a customer, right? But they may also have been a customer. So these buyers are connected to your organization, to your competitors already, and then they're on LinkedIn. So, they probably, maybe they met with 5 or 6 or 7 people in your organization through various cycles that they've been through before. They have somebody that they liked and trusted, and now they're going to go through a cycle again, and they ping them. And by the way, this happens to me all the time. And that's part of the reason we asked the question, is because I'm pretty public out there, and people know I've been around. And as a former analyst, I think have some amount of trust built up, and so people will ping me and say, "Hey, we're thinking about evaluating you and the other guys, and how are things going over there?" A lot of times their questions just about do you like working there? Or those kinds of things. They want to know what you're like as a company, as a partner, potential partner. They are in a lot of cases more social kinds of questions. Not always. I would say maybe 40% or so are that kind. But that's what's happening in a lot of cases. And it's not just the primary buyer. Like the CFO is doing it as well. And so what's interesting is the higher a person is in the organization, the less likely they are to back channel. If they're the CFO or some of the non-departmental people, they're a little bit less likely, all things being equal. But the other things that impact how often it happens is how expensive the solution is. So the more expensive a solution is, the more complex it is, the more likely it is that members of that buying group are going to back channel. And so what we found is that even the more senior people and the CFO types, they're more likely to be involved in those more expensive, complex purchases. And when they are, they back channel too. Those guys also, they know each other, right? They've been around, they work for each other. They went to school together, whatever the case may be. And so they all have resources, networks, and they take advantage of them to kind of get the inside scoop. The other thing to know is that, buyers are very defensive. They're afraid of talking to sellers really until they've made up their mind. They want to be able to decide on their own as a buying group to come to consensus, and they want trusted resources. So again, like in about 20% of cases, the seller is the trusted resource. but 80% of cases, it's somebody else. And I think sellers doing their job well, networking well, delivering value outside of buying processes increase their odds of being in the 20% or increase that 20 to 25. But that's kind of what it looks like.
Yeah, I think that, the thing about salespeople, we all know it. As soon as you talk to somebody, you basically become a line in a CRM. You're a transaction. And
Right.
so what happens is you get called up every month or, an email when you're going to make a decision. And we all hate that.
Yeah.
Though what happens, as I say, we go back when we get into our work mode, we forget all about the fact that we hate all that. And we start saying, so why haven't you phoned the person 3 times today?
Right.
Where that would actually be really annoying. So the one of the things that we've found is that when we've been in organizations, quite often, usually when we talk to organizations, our entry point is through sales leaders. And then what we do is we go up in the organization to actually empower the senior people within the business. And the most difficult people to empower are always the CFO and the CIO.
Hmm.
But once you actually get them to switch and you get them to understand that this is actually a platform to allow them to network or back channel, as you say, what happens is that the CIO is suddenly like, so I can go and talk to people about what cybersecurity system they've got. Yes. The CFO, that means I can go and talk to them about, about automating something to do with payables. Yes, that's what, and actually using social for what it should be, which is about being social.
Right.
So I can see this thing certainly within the people that are used to talking to customers, but sometimes you get this light going on with people that are more back office, but actually seeing this ability to have these conversations is fascinating.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And you can see it. So, Sixth Sense, my company actually manages that. So not pitching Sixth Sense, but just what we do.
Yes. So what do you do?
We create we create the back channel
Right.
for our buyers. So so we sell to marketing and sales organizations, but still primarily marketing organizations. If you're a marketer inside Sixth Sense, if you head a department, demand gen, ABX, whatever it might be, you have probably 100 conversations a year with prospects yourself about how you do your job. You are a resource, and you're offered by sellers. So our sellers, in their networking with buyers, find somebody on LinkedIn inside their target account. And so in my case, as a former Sales Decisions Forrester analyst, our reps are going into they cover an account, they go into that account, they look for somebody who is connected to me. If they're connected to me, then that person gets an email and says, hey, we've got Kerry Cunningham, former analyst for Forrester. And he's more than happy to talk to you about strategy, whatever it is, not part of you don't have to do a demo or anything like that. It's not a timeshare agreement. It's, this is something that we offer. So if you're interested in doing that, just let us know. And that's just offered that way. There's no, I want to pitch you now or whatever. It's just, hey, look, saw you're connected there. Love to offer that. That's done, with other, like our head of demand gen, our head of ABX, et cetera. Whenever there are, if they're trying to get to know the head of account-based marketing in one of their accounts, they say, hey, we've got a great ABX program. We do this, that, and the other. And if you'd ever like to talk to our head of ABM about how we do that, I can set that up for you. And the answer is yes, a lot of times, right?
Because in most sales leaders and most salespeople, it's all about control. They become control freaks, and so in a way, what they would want to do is actually say you're not allowed to talk to anybody else,
right?
Whereas you can't do that, and what you're doing is in effect saying this is happening. What we're going to do is actually we're going to facilitate it. Because we can't stop it, it's how can we can't push water uphill. I remember we did some work with Microsoft a number of years ago, And they were telling us that this was something that they were finding particular individuals, change makers or particular people within the accounts. And then they were basically feeding them with information.
Mm.
And actually, because they knew those people would then go and spread it in the organization. And that was one of the ways that they were basically getting their brand in front of, because everybody knows Microsoft, but it's Word and Excel. And what they would do, this is in the early days of Azure, before anybody knew what Azure was. And they were basically pinpointing people and then using that as the way of the customer was going to educate everybody else in the organization.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's, I think that's the way that we have to think about how deals are done. It's just not more than 20% of the time, it looks like, is it that kind of standard sales process that we think of, where a seller cold calls somebody out of the blue and introduces themselves and then begins a sales process, or much less. The marketing organization runs an email campaign. Somebody responds to the email campaign, and 2 weeks later, there's pipeline, as if that organization developed the idea of buying a solution in your category when they saw your email, and then suddenly 2 weeks later, they're in your pipeline for this $200,000 piece of software that you sell. I mean, that's absurd. Of course, that doesn't work that way. It never has. And your email campaign that looks like that got you a meeting because that organization has been in market for 6 months now, looking at vendors. You're one of them, and the timing of your email was such that they were about to reach out to you anyway. All right, and so the idea that we have to back up and think, as we talked about earlier, about what does it look like when I've been involved in a big purchase for my company? What did that look like? Did it look like me getting an email or a phone call from somebody and deciding to go into market for that thing? It might have, right? You might have gotten the idea, like sparked the idea, we really should think about replacing X, Y, and Z thing that we have. But then how long between that first spark of that idea and it actually happening was it? Because if that thing wasn't in your budget and it costs a couple $100,000, it doesn't happen this year. Yeah. Right? We don't have that kind of money sitting around most of the time. So I think it's just, we really do need to become a little more self-conscious about these things, as we've said a couple of times now. Because otherwise,
I think there may be people watching that sell something which is far more of a transaction, and they're deliberately pitching it as a, I have a sign off of $999,
right?
And therefore they're pitching it at $998, so I can just buy it on a credit card,
right?
And I totally understand that. I know people that sell stuff to marketeers, which is at $1,995, because they know that a lot of marketeers that are down one have like a $2,000 sign off. Data and for stuff like that. Mm-hmm. One thing that I'm interested in, I don't know if you've looked at it at all, Kerry, is if you think about non-sellers, so pre-sales people, sales engineers, people that are doing probably demonstrations on that. Do you have any data on what part they play in the sale?
I don't yet. So that's definitely an area for future research. Like, I suspect those people are often back channel targets.
Yes.
Right. So if you're the sales engineer, somebody like that who's been through a process, in the prior. So let's say that I'm a business person, senior business person. I run a department. I'm interested in a category of solution. I've been through 6 or 7 buying processes for that over the last 15 years. And I've met a couple of really good sales engineers along the way. And one of them's over here and one of them's over here. I'm going to ping them because I trust them. They did a great job when I was working with them before. They're not the pitch heavy people. They're not the ones, who are trying to, make sure that I buy their thing today or whatever. So I trust them, and I want to know how I see that your solutions changed a little bit in the last year. You've done this, and I've got a question about that my buying group is asking. I can reach out to you, and I feel okay about doing that. I can reach out to you and ask that question. And I feel, so I think that probably happens a lot, and I think we don't want to underestimate just how much when people change jobs every 2-3 years, in any given industry, it's pretty incestuous, right? I used to work with so-and-so, they're over here now in this other company. That's probably also a big part of that back channel.
Yeah, and I know the answer to this because I asked you before we went live, but I'm going to ask it again because we're live now. So dark social, the use of WhatsApp groups, a CFO WhatsApp group or a CIO, a cybersecurity WhatsApp group. Do you think that's being used for back channel discussions?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we'll dive into it more this year, but I'm sure it is. Those kinds of groups, and that's part of what we set up when we sponsor a CMO group and a BDR group, and part of the reason that people in those disciplines love those groups is because they get to help shape those networks and be in those networks and meet those people, so that when they have issues, questions, problems, they're evaluating a vendor, they've got a network that they can call on to help get answers. So I'm absolutely sure that's a huge part of it, and we'll be digging into that more this year in the research.
Okay, I mean that's. I remember someone coming to me 7 years ago, and IBM they'd been paid to do some research by IBM, where they found out that a lot of the buying that was going on was taking place in dark social, and they phoned me up because they said they found my book, and basically IBM had seen the research and rejected it. And they said it just couldn't happen. If you think about going back, people were laughing. Social media was a fad. Do really people think about have these conversations? And that person had a conversation with me, and I said, no, I think it's taking place. I'm in a number of sales ones where people are swapping ideas even from a sales perspective, but you can get a feel for the market and the category and what other people are talking about just by sitting there and listening, not necessarily taking part.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that's huge. And again, you just think about your own behavior. It's what you do all the time, right? When you need to know something, whether it's anything from considering a vendor to hiring an employee, it's the way we work.
Well, we all know that if we consider a vendor, we could get fired. Sorry, Bertram, were you going to ask?
No. I was just going back to obviously, because there is a practice of using back channels. I suspect there will soon be a practice of how do you get attractive to be contacted and to be part of a back channel, or to be at least a target of a back channel. Any ideas or any best practice that you could share?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is probably for me is the most obvious one, which is get your ass out there on social media, on LinkedIn, and be a presence and deliver value, not just being out and trolling and whatever is not going to help you, but actually deliver some value into the marketplace that you serve, so that the people who have the interests that your prospects do will see your content, understand that you have something to contribute, and call on you when they have questions and are evaluating vendors. That's really, I mean, it's a glorious time in the existence of B2B to be able to do that. It didn't, the beginning of our careers, it didn't exist. And we have sellers, we have BDRs who have tens of thousands of followers, right? So, they're out there delivering value to the constituencies that they serve. it's the way to do it.
Okay.
Yes, I think it amazes me. I quite often, whenever we talk to organizations, we always do a review of their social and stuff. And it always amazes me. You'll get an SDR that will have like 200 contacts in LinkedIn and they've never posted anything. And it's like, so what do they do all day?
Yeah. Well, you even I would imagine there are still companies where they say, well, I don't want you. You're not supposed to, you're not to be on LinkedIn all day posting things. I want you calling people and emailing people.
Yeah, we talked. I met someone recently, and they said that their CRO basically said their view was the reason why the IT industry has basically done a dip, and lots of people have been laid off. It's because all the salespeople have been playing on social media for the last couple of years.
Not selling, not playing enough is, I think, more like the case. Yeah, I think it's even if you think about the kind of the old mere exposure effect, the fact of being out in the marketplace and just having your name present where your buyers are, so that even if they don't consciously know that they've seen your name before, they see your name and it's familiar, and they think, well, I must know this person, or I've got a positive sense of who this company and this person is because I see them all the time. I don't remember anything they've ever said. I couldn't pinpoint a single thing that I got from them, but I see them all the time. Right? That's very powerful. That's what advertising is, and this is something that you can do yourself for nothing. Well, it takes time. That's it.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, one of those things is that it's partly because we've got two brains, and it's the monkey brain of experience where we get that feeling that we actually know someone and we like, the know, like, and trust somebody comes from the monkey brain, not the modern brain.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's all about experience. It's not necessarily, it may be, I follow you, Kerry, and what you produce is excellent. And therefore, I know you for what you create, but it could be that you're, so Barry Duffy basically said here, love joining webinar late and walk straight into a great line from Kerry. Now, you may know Barry, you may not, but the fact is that Barry knows you, and that's the important thing.
It is.
So even though you may have 30,000 followers, but it doesn't matter. You can't know everybody of those 30,000 people, but Barry knows you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's it. And in this case, it's not even necessary, I think, for somebody to know how they know you, or even really be able to say, do I really know? If you're familiar to people because you've simply been there, they are more likely to respond positively to you. And there's a ton of science behind that. Now, if people are familiar and they do know why, and the why is a negative, then that's not going to help. But if you've been out in the marketplace being neutral or better and delivering a little bit of value and content and whatever, they're going to be more likely to respond to you. And they don't have to know why necessarily. They just need to think, okay, this person's been around, right?
Kerry, this has been really great. And I'd like to ask, where can people learn more? How can they get in touch with you?
LinkedIn's probably the easiest place to find me, of course. So Kerry Cunningham on LinkedIn. And there might be a couple of Kerry Cunninghams, but I think at this point I probably come up first if you go look for me. And then if you go to sixthsense.com/research, there's a ton of our research there. There are no forms of any kind. It's all freely available. And so you can get all of our research there. But if you follow me, if you find me on LinkedIn, there's a link in my profile to all of that. So please do. That's what.
And I would echo that, Kerry, in terms of I follow you, and I would recommend everybody else follows you. And one of the things about it is that you always are putting out stuff where I go, I never thought about that. And there is a lot of stuff on LinkedIn which is the same old, and you're putting out stuff which is thought provoking. Sorry, Bertrand.
That's fine. It's just to say, fully understand that, fully agree, and we all need to go and visit Kerry's profile. We now have a newsletter, so don't miss an episode. get your highlights, beyond the show insights, and reminders of upcoming episodes. You can scan the QR code on screen or visit us at digitaldownload.live/newsletter. On behalf of the panelists, to our guests, and to our audience, thank you all, and see you next time.
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thanks, Kerry. That was excellent. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Bertrand, as well.